Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they walk the wrong path, and they never realize it until it's too late. And the terrifying part, you won't feel it happening. That's what makes it so dangerous. The world doesn't punish you the moment you make a wrong turn. It doesn't flash a warning sign. It doesn't send you an alert. It lets you feel comfortable. It lets you feel like things are fine. It lets you wake up every morning, go through your routine, and believe that you're moving forward, while quietly, slowly, you're drifting straight toward a life full of regret. One wrong decision doesn't destroy you, but one wrong direction, repeated every single day, compounded every single week, becomes something much worse than failure. It becomes a life you never actually chose, a version of yourself that you never wanted to be. And by the time most people realize it, years are gone. Opportunities are gone. The energy, the fire, the belief that things could have been different, all of it slowly burned out. Not by one big disaster, but by 1,000 small quiet steps in the wrong direction. This video is a warning, not a motivational speech, not a feel-good message, a real warning before the damage becomes permanent. Because if you're watching this right now, there's still time. Let me ask you something honest. When you think about the life you want, the success, the respect, the control over your own future, what do you think it takes to get there? Most people will say hard work, dedication, consistency. And look, I'm not here to tell you those things don't matter. They do, but here's what nobody tells you. Hard work without strategy doesn't build power, it builds exhaustion. You can grind every single day. You can outwork everyone around you. You can sacrifice your sleep, your comfort, your social life, and still end up exactly where you started, or worse, somewhere you never wanted to be. Because effort without direction is just noise. It's movement without progress. The real danger isn't laziness. Most people watching this aren't lazy. The real danger is invisible. It's the wrong alliances you never questioned. It's the emotional decisions you made in moments of weakness. It's the blind trust you gave to people who didn't deserve it. It's the approval you kept chasing from people who couldn't care less about your future. These are the things that take a good person, a hard-working person, and slowly steer them off course. And by the time they look up, they've been off course for years. This is exactly what Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone in history. Now, when most people hear the name Machiavelli, they think manipulation, they think evil, they think dirty politics. But that's a surface-level reading. What Machiavelli actually understood deeply, clearly without illusion, was human nature. He understood how people really behave, not how we wish they would behave. He understood how power is lost, how good intentions become deadly vulnerabilities, how the naive, the trusting, and the approval-seeking always end up serving someone else's agenda. His wisdom wasn't designed for villains. It was designed for the aware, for the ones who refuse to be used, for the ones who want to see the world clearly and make decisions with open eyes. And in this video, I'm going to give you 7 strategic corrections pulled from that philosophy. 7 ways to recognize the wrong path before it costs you your future. By the end of this, you'll have a mental framework that most people spend decades or a lifetime trying to figure out. And if you apply even half of what you're about to learn, you'll start to move differently, think differently, and protect yourself from the kind of quiet destruction that most people never even see coming. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose awareness. Let's get into it. Number 1, question every path before you commit. Here's a question most people never stop to ask. Why am I doing this? Not the surface answer. Not because it pays well, or because everyone else is doing it, or because my parents said so. The real answer, the honest answer. Why are you on the path you're on right now? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't choose their path. They inherit it. They absorb it. They follow the trend, follow the crowd, follow the advice of someone who meant well but didn't understand their specific life. And then they spend years building something they never actually wanted. Machiavelli warned about this with a clarity that still cuts deep today. He observed that the majority of people are reactive. They don't lead their own life. They respond to the expectations, the pressure, and the narrative around them. And when you're reactive, when you're just following along, you're not walking your path. You're walking someone else's. And here's what's worse. When you're living someone else's blueprint, you're not just wasting time. You're becoming useful to other people's goals. You're becoming a tool. The person who spent 10 years climbing a corporate ladder they never actually wanted. The person who built a business because it looked successful on paper, not because it aligned with any real vision. The individual who chose a relationship, a city, a lifestyle, because it looked right from the outside while feeling completely hollow from the inside. Machiavelli called these people followers without intention, and followers without intention, he understood, are always controlled by those who do have intention. So the first correction is this. Before you commit to any path, question it aggressively. Not once, not lightly, aggressively. What are the long-term outcomes of this direction? Not just the next 6 months, not just the comfortable first year. Where does this road realistically lead in 5 years, 10 years? Ask yourself who benefits if you choose this path, because sometimes the path that's being handed to you is designed to benefit the person handing it, not you. The advisor who steers you toward a certain career, the person who encourages your dependence, the structure that keeps you producing without ever building real leverage for yourself. This doesn't mean everyone around you has bad intentions. Most people giving you advice are sincere, but sincere people can still be wrong. And following sincere but wrong advice with your eyes closed is just as dangerous as following bad advice on purpose. Independent thinking isn't arrogance, it's survival. It means you evaluate every option, every direction, every opportunity with your own set of standards based on where you actually want to go, not where someone else thinks you should be. Strategy begins with independent thinking, and independent thinking begins with one simple but powerful habit: asking why before saying yes to any path that's placed in front of you. Before you walk any path, ask the hard questions. Make the uncomfortable evaluations, because a life built on unquestioned choices is a life that belongs to someone else, and you deserve better than that. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I think before committing. Number 2, stop seeking approval. This one is going to hit some of you harder than you expect, because most people won't admit how much of their life is being run by one invisible force: the need to be liked. Think about the last time you made a real decision. Not what to eat for lunch, but a decision that actually mattered. How much of that decision was based on what you actually wanted versus what you thought others would accept? How often do you hold back your real opinion because you're afraid of conflict? How often do you agree when you deeply disagree, stay silent when you should speak, or change your direction entirely because someone disapproved of where you were going? If that question makes you even slightly uncomfortable, pay attention, because that discomfort is pointing at something real. The desire to be liked is one of the most powerful destroyers of personal power ever identified. And Machiavelli saw it with complete clarity. He observed that rulers, leaders, and individuals who built their choices around the approval of others always ended up in a fragile and vulnerable position, because every time they let someone else's opinion become more important than their own judgment, they gave a piece of their power away. And that's exactly what happens. You give it away, piece by piece, decision by decision. Approval seeking makes you predictable, and when you're predictable, you're controllable. The moment people around you, colleagues, friends, even family, realize that you adjust your behavior based on their reactions, you stop being someone with authority over your own life. You become manageable. You become easy to steer, because all anyone has to do is show disappointment, pull back their attention, or give you a look of disapproval, and you'll change course. That is not freedom, that is a leash, disguised as social connection. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about becoming cold or isolated or indifferent to the people in your life. That would be a misreading of the entire principle. What Machiavelli drew attention to was the difference between respect and popularity, and that difference matters enormously. Popularity is fragile. It shifts with the mood of the room. It demands constant maintenance and constant compromise. It requires you to be slightly different versions of yourself, depending on who's watching. And the exhausting part, it never actually satisfies because approval gained through compromise doesn't feel like real validation. Deep down, you know you performed for it. Respect, on the other hand, is durable. It's earned by being consistent, direct, and operating from a place of genuine conviction. People don't actually respect someone who agrees with everything. They may enjoy that person in the moment, but over time, they stop taking them seriously. They stop considering them a real force. And sometimes, without even realizing it consciously, they start using that person's need for approval as leverage. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop making your choices based on what will be accepted and start making them based on what is correct. Correct for your actual goals. Correct for your actual values. Correct for the life you're actually trying to build. When you stop needing approval, something powerful happens. You become harder to manipulate. You become harder to pressure. Conversations shift. The way people interact with you changes. Not because you became aggressive or difficult, but because you started showing up with real conviction. And people feel conviction. They respond to it even when they don't agree with it. If your choices are being driven by other people's opinions, you are already off course because you're not building your life. You're performing for an audience that has no real stake in your future. Power comes from respect. And real respect starts with respecting yourself enough to make your own decisions, even when no one around you applauds. Number 3, study people before you trust them. The wrong allies will destroy you faster than any bad decision you've ever made on your own. Read that again, because it is one of the most important things in this entire video. The wrong people in your life, the wrong business partner, the wrong friend in a critical season, the wrong advisor, the wrong person you opened up to can cost you years, sometimes decades, sometimes opportunities that simply don't come back around. And this isn't about living in paranoia. This is about being clear, being honest, because the single biggest vulnerability most people carry isn't a lack of skill or a lack of ambition. It's trust given too quickly to people who hadn't yet earned it. Machiavelli spent significant time observing people in positions of power, watching alliances form, watching betrayals unfold, watching capable people fall not from external enemies, but from the very people they call their closest allies. And what he concluded was something that made a lot of people uncomfortable. Human nature is consistent. People, regardless of their words, regardless of their warmth in the moment, are fundamentally driven by 3 forces: ambition, envy, and self-interest. This isn't cynicism. This is observation. And it's not a condemnation of people. It's simply an honest acknowledgement of how human beings operate. When you understand those forces, you stop being shocked when someone acts in their own interest, even at your expense. You stop being blindsided because you already understood what was possible. The mistake most people make is they trust words. They trust a handshake, a warm conversation, a shared moment that felt genuine. And words are easy. Anyone can say the right thing. Anyone can express loyalty in a moment when loyalty costs them nothing. What you need to study is behavior, consistent behavior over time across different situations. How does this person act when there's nothing to gain from being kind? How do they talk about other people when those people aren't in the room? When they've made a mistake, do they own it honestly or do they deflect and redirect? When you're struggling, do they show up or do they quietly disappear until things look better? These aren't complicated observations, but they require patience and they require you to be willing to see clearly even when you want the connection to work. Machiavelli was direct. Trust should be extended slowly, not because the world is full of malicious people, but because you genuinely can't know someone's character from a single interaction, or even a handful of good experiences. You need to observe them under pressure, when they have something to gain at your expense, when they think no one is watching, when loyalty is inconvenient. That observation takes time, and the people who are actually worth your trust won't be offended by that process. They'll demonstrate their character consistently. They'll prove it without being asked. Your inner circle is one of the most powerful determinants of your entire trajectory. The people closest to you influence your thinking, your confidence, your access to opportunity, and your blind spots. If the wrong people are inside that circle, the damage compounds in ways that are difficult to even fully measure. Be selective, be patient, be observant, and don't be so hungry for connection or partnership that you skip the only step that actually tells you who someone really is. Time and behavior. Distance protects your future. Choose your inner circle like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Actions reveal character. Number 4, control your emotions before they control your direction. Let's talk about the decisions that hurt the most, not the decisions you made carelessly, not the ones where you had no information. The ones that hurt the most are always the ones you made when you were angry or afraid, or so overwhelmed with excitement that your judgment completely left the room. Almost every major regret in a person's life can be traced back to a decision made in a heightened emotional state. The relationship you stayed in far too long because fear kept whispering what ifs every time you got close to leaving. The deal you walked away from in a moment of anger that you spent years wishing you'd held on to. The opportunity you jumped into without thinking because the excitement made everything feel obvious and certain until it wasn't. Emotions are powerful and they are not the enemy. Let me be very clear about that. Emotions provide real information. The problem is when emotions become the decision maker, because emotions are wired to make you react fast, not think clearly. They are designed for immediate response, not long-term strategy. Anger narrows your focus to the moment and makes the immediate feel more important than any consequence. Anger says, "Wrecked now, deal with the fallout later," and there is almost always fallout. Fear makes you retreat when you should push forward or cling tightly when you need to release. Fear disguises avoidance as caution and calls it wisdom when it's actually paralysis. And excitement, possibly the most underestimated disruptor, floods your mind with optimism and shuts down the part of you that asks the questions that need to be asked. Machiavelli observed this pattern with consistent clarity throughout his analysis of leaders and power. He watched people who had every resource, every strategic advantage, every legitimate path to lasting success throw it all away in a single moment of emotional reaction. Leaders who declared war from wounded pride. Advisors who revealed sensitive information in flashes of anger. Capable people who abandoned winning positions simply because they couldn't tolerate the emotional discomfort of waiting. People who made permanent decisions from temporary emotional states. He understood that the strategic mind is not an emotionless mind. It is a disciplined mind. A mind that can feel everything: the anger, the fear, the excitement, the hurt, and still choose to pause before acting. That word matters more than almost anything else in this tip: pause. That single act, pausing before responding, before deciding, before reacting, is one of the most trainable and most powerful skills you will ever develop. Because the pause creates space, and in that space, something shifts. The emotion is still present, but it is no longer driving. Your judgment has a chance to step in. When you're in a heated or charged moment, step back physically if you need to remove yourself from the room. Give it time. Even 60 minutes of distance from a highly charged emotional state will change your perspective in meaningful ways. A full day of distance will sometimes show you a situation that looks completely different from the one you thought you were in. Ask yourself in those moments, if I weren't angry right now, would I still make this decision? If I weren't afraid, would I still retreat? If I weren't caught up in the wave of excitement, would I still agree to this without asking more questions? If the answer shifts even slightly, that shift is your signal. The emotion was the one making the call, not you. The people who build real lasting results, Betsy Achafi and careers, their relationships, their personal development, are not always the most intelligent or the most talented. They are frequently the most controlled, not cold, not shut down, controlled. They feel everything and act from strategy. Your emotions are information. Learn to read them, but never give them the final vote on major decisions. That vote belongs to your judgment, and your judgment only works clearly when you give it space to breathe. Discipline is the bridge between where you are right now and where you're actually trying to go. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I pause, then decide. Number 5, avoid comfortable illusions. The most dangerous place in your life right now is probably not the hard place. It's the comfortable one. When things are genuinely hard, when you're under pressure, when you're struggling, when the situation is clearly not working, something in you responds, you adjust. You look for solutions. You develop because you have no other real option. Difficulty forces movement. But the comfortable place is different. The comfortable place lets you stay exactly where you are for months, for years, sometimes for decades. While slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, it costs you something real. Your edge, your hunger, the sharpness that comes from being genuinely challenged. Your belief that more is not just possible, but actually still reachable for you. And you don't feel it leaving. That's the cruelest part of comfortable stagnation. It doesn't announce itself. There's no alarm, no obvious signal, just a slow, gradual settling. And one day you realize the fire you had a few years ago has become something much smaller and much quieter. Machiavelli wrote about this principle with a clarity that rattled his contemporaries. He believed that the greatest long-term threat to power and position was not the visible enemy. It was the illusion of security that caused people to stop doing the things that built their strength in the first place. When people felt safe, they became complacent. When they became complacent, they became soft. And soft in a world that is always moving, whether you are or not, is just a slower version of falling behind. This exact pattern plays out in everyday life in ways that are so familiar, it should be uncomfortable to acknowledge. The job that pays well enough to remove financial pressure, but stopped challenging you 18 months ago. The relationship that isn't painful, but isn't growing either, where two people are coexisting out of habit and familiarity, rather than genuine connection and mutual development. The city you stayed in not because it serves where you're going, but because leaving requires more energy than staying. The creative project you keep delaying because the current situation is just comfortable enough to reduce the urgency. Comfort keeps people in all of these places. Comfort says things like, "It's not that bad, it could be worse. At least you know what to expect here." And that voice is almost always the most expensive voice you'll ever listen to. Machiavelli's core belief on this was unambiguous. Real security comes not from comfort, but from strength, from continuous development, from consistently making sure that your capabilities exceed what your current situation demands. Because the moment you stop growing is the moment you begin to lose ground, even if nothing around you appears to change, even if everything looks stable from the outside. Here's a question worth sitting with honestly. Is your current situation making you stronger or making you softer? Is the path you're on right now actually building something meaningful, or is it primarily protecting you from discomfort? If you stepped away from your current situation tomorrow, whether it's a job, a relationship, a city, a mindset, would you look back in 5 years and feel like that time built you, or like you simply waited? Those are uncomfortable questions, and the discomfort is worth it, because growth requires friction. The right kind of challenge is not a sign that something is broken. It is a sign that something real is happening, something that will compound into genuine capability and genuine progress. If a situation, an environment, a relationship, or even a belief system has stopped your growth, it is the wrong path, regardless of how familiar it feels, regardless of how much easier it is to stay, regardless of how much the comfortable voice tells you that you're fine. Comfort that costs you your future is not safety. It is a very slow and very quiet form of loss, and the awareness to see it before it's already taken years from you, that awareness is everything. Number 6, think in consequences, not moments. Every decision you make has two parts, the moment and the consequence. And the way most people live, they're almost entirely focused on the moment. They make choices based on what feels good right now, what reduces the tension they're feeling today, what satisfies the immediate need, quiets the immediate discomfort, or produces the immediate reward. And the consequence either doesn't enter their thinking at all, or it enters vaguely as a distant abstraction that they'll deal with when it arrives. But here's what nobody who thinks that way ever fully accepts. The consequence always arrives. This is one of the most consistent and most fundamental differences between people who build something real over time and people who stay stuck in cycles they can't seem to escape. It is not always about talent. It is not always about opportunity. It is very often about time horizon, about how far forward a person is willing and trained to think before making a decision. The person who builds a life they're actually proud of is the person who can look at a choice today and honestly trace what that choice will cost or produce in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years, and then make their decision based on that honest projection, not based on what's exciting or comfortable or emotionally satisfying right now in this moment. Machiavelli returned to this point consistently throughout his work. He watched leader after leader, powerful person after powerful person, make decisions that looked brilliant in the immediate term and proved catastrophic over time. He saw alliances formed for quick gain that created deep instability later. He watched people choose short-term victories that converted into long-term enemies. He observed how the pattern of short-term thinking was one of the most reliable predictors of eventual failure. Regardless of how smart someone was, regardless of the resources they had access to, regardless of the opportunity they started with, short-term pleasure chosen consistently over long-term positioning produces a life that feels satisfying in moments and hollow over time. The spending that feels like relief now and creates financial pressure that follows you for years. The avoidance of a difficult but necessary conversation that feels like peace in the short term and becomes a damaged relationship or a missed correction down the road. The pattern of choosing rest when effort was needed, fine occasionally, genuinely costly when it becomes a default. None of these are dramatic. None of them feel like major disasters in the moment. That's exactly why they're dangerous. They compound quietly. Strategic thinking means deliberately training yourself to extend your view, not obsessively. You can't live your entire life 10 years ahead and still actually experience your present. But habitually, especially before significant decisions, before anything major, you need to force yourself to trace the full range of likely consequences. Here is a practice that Machiavelli essentially articulated and that modern strategic thinkers have formalized. Before any significant decision, do not start by imagining the best case. Start by imagining the worst case. If this goes genuinely wrong, not just a little wrong, but really wrong, what does that situation look like? Can you survive it? Can you rebuild from it? Is the realistic downside worth the realistic upside? Most impulsive decisions collapse completely under that question, because when you genuinely imagine the worst realistic outcome and realize it's something you cannot easily recover from, that information should dramatically change your approach. Either it prevents a mistake, or it pushes you to build in protections before you move. Power belongs to people who prepare for consequences before those consequences exist, not to people who react to them once they've already arrived and already cost something. Train yourself to think in time. Think past the moment. Think past the week. Think past the short-term relief or the short-term excitement. And ask yourself honestly, what is the real-life cost of this choice? What does the version of my life 1 year from now look like if I make this decision today? Ask that question with discipline and honesty, and it will protect you from more regret than almost anything else ever could. Number 7. Correct your path early and without ego. This is the tip where most people fail, not because it's the hardest to understand. In terms of pure logic, it may actually be the most straightforward idea in this entire video. People fail this one because of something much more personal than logic: pride. Pride is the reason people stay in wrong careers for years, sometimes entire decades after some part of them already knows it isn't right. Pride is the reason people hold on to strategies that the evidence has clearly stopped supporting, doubling down instead of adjusting, because changing course feels like standing in front of the world and announcing that they were wrong. And for many people, that feeling of being wrong publicly, visibly wrong, is worse than continuing to fail quietly. That is not strength. That is ego wearing the mask of commitment, and ego left unchecked is one of the most reliable and most invisible destroyers of a person's potential. Machiavelli was not subtle on this point. He observed over and over that the people who maintained power, who adapted and survived and continued to build across changing circumstances, were not the people who never made mistakes. Every person in any position of real influence makes mistakes. That is not the differentiator. The differentiator was this: the people who endured were the ones who recognized their mistakes early and corrected them without hesitation, without needing to justify the wrong move to save their reputation, without prioritizing the appearance of consistency over the reality of results. Machiavelli valued results above everything else, not appearances, not the story you've constructed about yourself, not the image of someone who always knew exactly what they were doing. Actual, real, measurable results. And what that means practically is something worth sitting with. If you are on the wrong path, the cost of staying does not stay constant. It compounds. Every week you spend moving in the wrong direction is a week further from where you need to be. Every month you hold on to an approach that isn't producing results is another month of your time, your energy, your resources, your irreplaceable opportunities, all moving in the wrong direction. The earlier you correct, the less it ultimately costs you. Always changing course is not weakness. Let me be absolutely direct about that. Changing course is one of the clearest demonstrations of genuine strategic intelligence available. It requires more honest courage to say, "This is not working and I need to adjust," than to keep going, because you're afraid of what the adjustment says about you. It requires more real discipline to correct early than to stay comfortable in a wrong direction, because at least the wrong direction is familiar. Here is the analogy that makes this undeniable. A pilot who notices they're off course by 2 degrees and corrects immediately makes a small, easy adjustment and arrives at the destination on time. A pilot who waits 3 hours before correcting that same 2-degree deviation now has to make a massive disruptive course change and may have already passed the destination entirely. 2 degrees off course caught early is almost nothing. 2 degrees off course sustained for years is a completely different life than the one you intended to build. Let the ego go. Evaluate your current path with honesty, not with the investment you've already made in it as a measuring stick. The time and energy you've already spent are not a reason to keep going in a direction that isn't right. They are simply spent. What you can still protect is what's ahead. Correct without drama. Correct without self-punishment. Correct because you value your future more than you value the appearance of having always known exactly what you were doing. Results over ego. That is the standard. That is always the standard. The sooner you adjust, the less you lose. And the willingness to adjust honestly, clearly, without needing it to look a certain way, is one of the things that genuinely separates people who build something real from people who spend their lives defending choices that were never working. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I correct without ego. Most people realize they've been on the wrong path when it is already too late to recover what was lost. Not completely too late. You can always start again. You can always rebuild. Life gives most people more chances than they recognize in the moment, but late enough that years are gone. Late enough that the energy and the hunger and the absolute certainty that more is possible, the kind that lives in you strongly when you're young and everything still feels open, has faded into something quieter, something heavier, something that doesn't quite believe the way it used to. And that's the real cost. Not just the external losses, the missed opportunities, the wrong investments of time and trust, the internal cost, the slow erosion of confidence, the quiet voice that used to push you forward, becoming a quiet voice that wonders if it's too late, if you missed your window, if this is just what life is. That happens to capable people, genuinely capable people, smart people, people who worked hard and wanted something real and had everything they needed to build it. They just never had a framework for evaluating their direction. Clearly, they trusted too quickly. They let emotions make decisions that strategy should have made. They stayed comfortable when they needed to be uncomfortable. They chased approval when they needed to build conviction. They thought in moments when they needed to think in years. And they let pride keep them walking in the wrong direction long after something in them already knew it was wrong. These are not fatal character flaws. They are patterns, and patterns can be recognized. And patterns that are recognized can be changed, but only if you see them. That is always the first and most critical step, seeing clearly. If this video is finding you today, if this message is landing right now in this specific moment, I want you to take that seriously, because sometimes the right information arrives exactly when it needs to. Not after the major mistake has already been made, not years from now when the damage has already compounded, now before. And if that's where you are right now, here is what I want you to do. Pause, not as a concept. Actually pause. Step back from whatever is happening in your life right now and look at your most important current decisions. Honestly, the path you are on professionally, the relationships you are investing in, the patterns you keep repeating, the direction you are actually moving versus the direction you intended to be moving. Ask the questions that this video laid out. Ask who benefits from your current path. Ask what the long-term consequence of your most significant choices will realistically be. Ask whether the people closest to you have earned that proximity through consistent behavior. Ask whether you are making decisions from strategy or from fear or approval or pride or the need for comfort. Ask whether a situation that feels safe is actually building you or slowly softening you. If you answer those questions honestly, you will know. You will know whether you are on the right path or whether a correction needs to happen. And right now, before this video ends, if anything you heard today shifted something in how you see your situation, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it genuinely helps this message reach someone else who may need it just as much as you did today. Share this video with someone in your life who is at a crossroads, someone making a big decision, someone who seems stuck in a loop they can't identify, someone who would benefit from hearing this before the cost gets higher. And if you want to keep building this kind of strategic, clear awareness about how to actually navigate life and power and decision subscribe to this channel right now. Every single video we produce is built to give you the kind of thinking that most people spend decades trying to develop through painful experience alone. Don't wait for the painful experience when you can have the awareness. Now, the right path was never going to be found by luck. It was never about luck. It is chosen through strategy, through careful observation of people and situations, through honest self-evaluation that doesn't flinch from what it sees, and through the discipline to act on what you see, even when your ego is telling you to stay exactly where you are. Every correction you make today is something your future self will not have to pay for. Every hard question you ask now is a regret that never gets to form. Every moment of honest awareness you build right now is a layer of protection around the future you are trying to create. Because in life, the greatest danger was never failure. The greatest danger is walking the wrong path every single day and calling it normal, getting comfortable in it, building your identity around it, and waking up years from now in a life you never actually chose, wondering how you got there. You know better now. You have the framework, you have the awareness, you have the corrections. Use them, choose deliberately. Protect your future, because the path is still in front of you, and the direction you move in from this moment is entirely yours to decide. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. My path, my choice.